Breaking news. A Philippine vessel has been rammed by the China Coast Guard, sending shockwaves through the region and igniting a fresh wave of international concern. Chaos erupts in the South China Sea as Manila accuses Beijing of reckless and illegal actions. The already volatile waters have become the stage for a dangerous escalation, with both sides trading accusations and the world holding its breath. On March 5, 2024, years of simmering tension finally boiled over. The South China Sea, long a flashpoint for territorial disputes, witnessed a confrontation that many had feared but hoped would never come to pass. What began as a routine supply mission quickly spiraled into an international crisis. The UNIZA May 4, a small and unarmed Philippine supply boat, found itself encircled by massive China Coast Guard ships, their imposing presence a stark reminder of the power imbalance at sea. The mission was simple: deliver food, water, and essential supplies to a remote outpost, the BRP Sierra Madre, where Filipino Marines stand guard. But in these fiercely contested waters, nothing is ever truly routine. The Filipino crew watched anxiously as Chinese ships closed in, maneuvering with chilling precision to block their path and assert dominance. The UNIZA May 4 tried to hold its course, determined to reach the Marines who depended on them for survival. Suddenly, a China Coast Guard vessel cut sharply across their bow. The sickening crunch of wood against steel echoed across the waves as the Philippine boat shuddered violently, its hull splintering under the force of the impact. The crew's worst fears had become reality. The crew scrambled to hold on, chaos erupting on deck as their path to the shoal was brutally blocked. This was no accident. It was a calculated message, delivered with brute force and unmistakable intent. As the damaged boat tried to recover, another Chinese vessel unleashed a powerful water cannon, shattering the windshield and injuring several crew members, adding to the terror and confusion. The force was overwhelming, designed to intimidate, demoralize, and send a clear warning. These were unarmed civilians on a humanitarian mission, now targets of state aggression. Their journey was over for the day, but the shockwaves from this violent encounter were just beginning to ripple outward, raising urgent questions about safety, sovereignty, and the future of peace in the region. The world was watching, and the fragile peace had been shattered. As images of the battered supply boat flashed across global news screens, leaders and citizens alike were left to wonder. What comes next in these troubled waters? The UNIZA May 4 was no warship, just a civilian-chartered vessel carrying food and water. Its mission resupply Marines at one of the world's most precarious outposts. Accompanied by a Philippine Coast Guard escort, they faced a formidable Chinese flotilla, Coast Guard ships and maritime militia. The Chinese objective: blockade the shoal, prevent Philippine access. Warnings blared over the radio, each side asserting its rights. The Chinese ships escalated, maneuvering dangerously close, testing the Filipinos' resolve. The collision was no accident. Footage showed a deliberate ramming maneuver. This tactic, known as shouldering, flagrantly violated maritime law. It marked a dangerous escalation from intimidation to direct violence. Beijing's message was clear: the rules of engagement had changed. The world had just witnessed it. To understand this conflict, you must know Ayungin Shoal, second Thomas Shoal. It's a submerged reef, but its location makes it a critical flashpoint. In 1999, the Philippines ran the BRP Sierra Madre aground here, creating a permanent outpost. The rusting ship, manned by Marines, is a symbol of Philippine resolve. For China, the shoal falls within its sweeping 9-line claim. Control would give Beijing another strategic foothold in the South China Sea. China's strategy: isolate the outpost, block repairs, and wait for the ship and the Philippine claim to collapse. Every resupply mission is a race against time. Resupplying the BRP Sierra Madre is a test of courage and endurance. These missions, called Ro-Re, are lifelines for the Marines, planned meticulously but always unpredictable. Each trip faces Chinese ships, their response ranging from warnings to water cannons and collisions. The psychological toll is immense, but the mission continues out of duty and national pride. Life aboard the Sierra Madre is harsh: cramped quarters, rust, isolation, and constant Chinese pressure. A failed mission means dwindling food and water. Each successful run is a victory, proof the Philippines won't be bullied. Manila now publicizes these missions, embedding journalists to document the harassment. This transparency shines a global spotlight on China's actions. The struggle of these sailors and Marines has become a powerful narrative of defiance. It's a story the world can't ignore. At the heart of the conflict lies China's sweeping claim over the South China Sea, marked by the infamous 9-dash line. This line, drawn unilaterally by Beijing, encompasses nearly 90% of the entire sea, an area rich in resources, vital shipping lanes, and strategic military value. The 9-dash line cuts deep into the exclusive economic zones, or EEZs, of the Philippines, Vietnam, Malaysia, Brunei, and other Southeast Asian nations, creating a web of overlapping claims and rising tensions. For Beijing, this claim is rooted in what it calls indisputable historical rights, a stance it insists is non-negotiable. But for the rest of the world, it's a direct challenge to the established rules of international law and the sovereignty of neighboring countries. The 1982 United Nations Convention on the Law of the Sea, or UNCLOS, was created to set clear, fair rules for maritime boundaries and resource rights, aiming to prevent exactly these kinds of disputes. In 2013, after years of failed negotiations and growing pressure, the Philippines took a bold step, challenging China's claim at the Permanent Court of Arbitration in The Hague, seeking international legal clarity. The tribunal's 2016 ruling was unambiguous. China's 9-dash line has no legal basis under international law, and the Second Thomas Shoal, a flashpoint in the dispute, lies squarely within the Philippine EEZ. China flatly rejected the verdict, dismissing it as waste paper, and refused to recognize or abide by the decision, further straining regional relations. Instead of backing down, Beijing doubled down, rapidly building artificial islands, installing military bases, and fortifying its presence across the disputed waters, turning reefs into strategic outposts. China's message to the world is clear. It will not be bound by international law when it believes its core interests and sovereignty are at stake. The March 5th collision between Chinese and Philippine vessels is a stark, physical manifestation of this ongoing defiance, a flashpoint that could escalate at any moment. As tensions rise, the very foundation of the world's rules-based order is being tested, with global leaders watching closely and the stakes higher than ever. Today, the Philippines stands on the front line, defending not just its own territory, but the principles of international law and the future of regional stability. The March 5th collision is just one in a long pattern of Chinese harassment. Filipino vessels face relentless intimidation, water cannons, dangerous maneuvers, and blockades. These tactics stay just below the threshold of war, but cause real damage and risk lives. China's maritime militia, civilian-looking fishing boats, add another layer, swarming and blocking access. This gray zone strategy gives Beijing plausible deniability while tightening its grip. The goal? Make it impossible for the Philippines to operate freely in its own waters. This time, the world saw everything. Journalists on board captured the collision and water cannon assault in real time. The footage went viral, exposing China's aggression and contradicting Beijing's denials. The Philippines' strategy of transparency turned cameras into powerful weapons. The images galvanized global opinion. David versus Goliath on the high seas. The US and allies quickly condemned China's actions, reaffirming support for the Philippines. Beijing stuck to its script, blaming Manila, but the evidence was undeniable. The incident highlighted the threat to freedom of navigation and the rules-based order. Viral videos did more than document a collision. They rallied a diplomatic coalition. In the age of social media, a camera can be as mighty as a cannon. China's cabbage strategy is a slow-motion takeover. First, swarms of maritime militia, civilian fishing boats, block access. Next, white-hulled Coast Guard ships enforce China's claims with water cannons and ramming. Finally, Chinese Navy warships patrol in the distance, a menacing backstop. Each layer tightens the noose around the BRP Sierra Madre, isolating it. The goal: suffocate the Philippine outpost without firing a shot. It's a patient, grinding strategy of attrition. The standoff at Second Thomas Shoal is more than just a regional dispute between two countries. It's a flashpoint that could shape the future of international relations and the way nations interact on the world stage. At its core, this is a battle for the future of international law. whether the world will be governed by agreed-upon rules or by the raw power of the strongest nations. The outcome here could set a precedent for how disputes are resolved everywhere. If China can ignore legal rulings and impose its will through force, then borders and sovereignty everywhere become less secure. It sends a message that might makes right, and that international agreements can be disregarded. The South China Sea is not just a local waterway. It's a vital artery for global trade, with trillions of dollars worth of goods passing through each year. Any conflict here would send shockwaves through the world economy, affecting supply chains and prices everywhere. For the Philippines, this standoff is about more than territory. It's a fight for sovereignty, for the right to feed its people, and for access to vital energy resources that could shape its future. The image of a small, determined supply boat facing down much larger Chinese ships has become a symbol of resistance. It resonates deeply, not just in the Philippines, but with anyone who values standing up to overwhelming odds. The U.S.-Philippines Defense Treaty adds another layer of complexity. A single miscalculation or escalation could draw in other nations and spark a much wider conflict, with consequences far beyond the region. Around the world, people watch every mission unfold, hoping that diplomacy and peace will prevail over confrontation and violence. The stakes are enormous: global order, economic stability, and the fundamental principle that might does not make right. What happens here could influence how nations resolve disputes for generations. The story of the UNISA May 4 is more than a headline. It's a warning to the world, and a call to pay attention before the next crisis erupts.